Okay, so this is my presentation on potassium. So the background and discovery of potassium, it was discovered by Sir Humphrey Davy in 1807, and he used a process called electrolysis. And how he was able to find this is that he used molten caustic potash, and potassium actually is found there's like about 2.1 to 2.4% of the Earth's in the Earth's crust, and so by using the molten caustic potash, he was able to isolate potassium from the compound, um, which is potassium hydroxide, or the element symbol KOH. But additional background on potassium, the metal at its pure state is a soft, waxy metal, so it's very, very easy to cut, and it has a glimmer of shine to it when at first, although it tends to oxidize quickly with the oxygen in the atmosphere. So how the mineral helps the body. Potassium, it has actually several different ways that it can help the body, but some of the main ones is water balance and nerve impulse transmission. Um, and nerve impulse transmission, includes muscle contractions and contractions of the heart. And this is actually really similar to how sodium functions in the body. But some other ways, the potassium, if there's low amounts in the body, it can cause muscle cramps, constipation, and loss of appetite can occur. But actually, later on in the presentation, the ways to best maintain these levels of potassium so that these problems do not occur will be discussed. Okay, so in this picture, the circle is supposed to represent the cell body of a neuron, so there's no axon on it. But how potassium helps in neuron transmission. So in the center of the cell body, there's lots of potassium. So its element, the symbol K. And when it's at its resting membrane potential, which is RMP, it's at negative 70 millivolts. And when it's at its resting membrane potential, the concentration of sodium is greater on the outside, hence more Na on the outside of the cell, and potassium concentrator is greater on the inside of the cell. That's why there's more potassium, that's why more K is inside the cell. And actually, an important part of this is important to know that sodium is more positively charged ion, while potassium is more negatively charged. So that's why the resting membrane potential of the cell body is negative 70. But in order to start the action potential of a neuron transmission, which will be talked about a little bit more on the next slide, the cell body resting membrane potential needs to be lowered to or raised to negative 55 millivolts. And what exactly happens is that once a neurotransmitter reaches the cell body, this circle right here, chemically gated and electrical gated sodium and potassium channels are open, which is what you can see on the bottom and the top of the cell body. And what will happen to lower it is that potassium will want to go out of the cell, more potassium will go out, and sodium will always want to come in to the cell, which is what raises the resting membrane potential to negative 55. So as you can see, continuing on from the cell body, in this picture here, you can see that there's a cell body and then the axon, which is the straight tunnel in the middle. But this is how potassium then continues to help neuron transmissions through our body. So what happens first, before potassium does anything, is that the neuron has to be depolarized, which is on the bottom part of the neuron. And so in other words, an action potential or message has to be sent down the neuron first. But as the message is being sent down the neuron, the sections of the neurons above where you can see axon 1, axon 2, goes on axon 3, axon 4, they're being repolarized. And this happens almost simultaneously, but it's not. So this is, as it's getting repolarized, it's what happens is it's getting ready for another action potential or for another message to be sent down that neuron. But as the so as axon 3 down here, where it just says -70, as it is being depolarized, axon 1 is being repolarized. And so what happens is that voltage-gated potassium channels are being opened to allow for potassium to go back in to raise the resting membrane potential of the axon back to -70 in order for it to be ready to be depolarized again for another message. And this is constantly happening over and over and over again, very, very, very quickly. But as it goes down, axon 3 is being depolarized, axon 1 is being repolarized with the potassium channels as potassium is putting it back to its normal state. And then axon 4, as axon 4 is being depolarized, axon 2 is being repolarized, and so on. And it keeps going down until it reaches the end of the neuron. So another way, the second way that potassium helps in the body, it also plays a big part in water balance. So in general ways, the body rids of extra fluid through the need of it in digestion, which is excreted in through the feces or through urine. And you also can get rid of water through the sweat, through any cardiac activity. And what this does is to cool the body, it's to regulate your body temperature. But the sweat is very salty. And in addition to the cardiac activity, the electrolytes in our body is what helps our body to send nerve transmissions, which keeps our muscles contracting. So we're running and we won't just fall over. And it also helps for our heart to continually contract and pump blood through the body, which is what we need to be able to get the air, the oxygen, the blood to where we need it so that our muscles can continue to contract. And additionally, it can also help our body to regulate water balances. Our internal cue is telling us when we're thirsty. Also, but this isn't very good because by the time you're knowing that you're thirsty, it says that you're already dehydrated. So it's good to continually be drinking water to get those electrolytes, which potassium is, to get more of that in your body. But one helpful way to know, a little tip, to know that you're consuming enough water is your concentration of your urine. To be able to know if it's too yellow, too dark of a yellow, you are dehydrated. You need more water in your body. And then if it's more of a light yellow or a clear yellow, then you know that you have enough water in your body. One myth that continually comes up is bananas help treat muscle cramps. Now, this is true. Bananas are full of potassium, although it is thought that when people have a muscle cramp because of exercise, some think that it is best to eat bananas, and this is true and not true. It is not true in the sense that it's that bananas will take too long to digest to help the muscle cramp. And so, in order to help a muscle cramp, it is better just to stretch them and rub them out. But it is still good to eat bananas while to help raise your levels of potassium to maybe prevent a muscle cramp in the future. So how potassium interacts, it interacts with other minerals, calcium and sodium, and this goes back to the neuron transmissions, but calcium more specifically helps carry the neurotransmitters through the synapse, which is between the end of the cell end of the neuron and to the cell body of the neuron, and which would then cause for those potassium channels to be open and for the sodium to come in, the potassium to go out, which is starting that action potential down the exon terminal. So some recommendations. Basically, we should be getting about 4,700 milligrams or 4.7 grams of potassium per day. You can take supplements, but that's not always the best way to go. The best way is to increase your vegetable and fruit intake. You can also get it in meat and other proteins, but this is a huge way is through vegetable and fruits. Additionally, it's best to eat more unprocessed foods, so more fresh food, such as potatoes, beef, tomatoes, orange juice, white beans. And you can make some sort of soup or chili out of this. But as you can see in this table down here, as I made as a little visual, these side numbers don't really mean anything or impact, but it's to show that unprocessed food has not a lot of sodium and it has a lot of potassium in it. But as you eat more processed food, the sodium concentration rises and the potassium concentration lowers, and that is because sodium is used more to help preserve the foods which are canned and more processed. And so eating more fresh vegetables and fruits and will help to be able to get that potassium intake that you need. And so here's kind of an ideal day you could use to be able to get your portions of your daily intake of potassium. And this daily intake of potassium, you could start the day off with your breakfast and you could have 2 medium-sized bananas, a quarter of a medium avocado on toast, and a cup of regular plain yogurt. And you're also getting other vitamins. You're also getting some fiber in there from all these, from the bread, from the fruits, from the vegetables. And then at lunch, maybe you can have a little bit smaller because you had a pretty heavy breakfast, and so you can have a salad with other vegetables, and that's getting those dark greens that you need. And just the lettuce being counted in this meal, that's about 100 milligrams. And then for dinner, you can be able to have 1 baked potato, 1 cup of white beans, and a half a cup of cooked carrots. And with the dinner, you can make like a chili with the beans and putting in some meat and those carrots to put on top of the potato with some cheese, and that way you're getting dairy, you're getting fiber, you're getting vitamins, you're getting those minerals, you're getting the protein, you're getting those fats from the meat, which is all around a pretty healthy meal, and you're still getting that high level of potassium intake for your day. And if you need for a snack at some point in the day, whether it be if you had a long day at work or at school, you can take a cup of edamame, which is very, very high in potassium, about 676 milligrams, to be able to get that total of 4,748 milligrams just in these foods. And just because these foods are not exactly, it's not exactly what you have to have every day, but it's a rough kind of outline of something that you could do once or twice a week and something you can prep for to be able to have those highly concentrated foods that have potassium in them. But there are several other foods that have potassium in them that you can have, but these are just some that have that are highly concentrated in potassium. Overall, the summary about potassium, the best way is just to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. And you can eat canned if that's what it has to be able to, because of cost of money or anything, but the best way is to get with the more fresh fruits and vegetables, and because then there is lower levels of sodium in that and higher percent of potassium in those foods to get your daily intake. And that's my presentation on potassium. Thanks for listening.